And welcome to HBYOB BrewCast, where we talk about making beer, talk about drinking beer, except for tonight. No need to whine about it. We're going to talk about wine and cider. That's right. We're going to get a little fruity tonight. Join us. And this is Easy Kill. And thanks for joining us tonight live, HBYOB BrewCast, live on YouTube, live on Spreaker. You can go to hbyob.com, catch us there. And tonight, I have my two regular co-hosts, Chris Allen. What are you drinking tonight?
What's up, Mark? And I'm drinking a beer. Literally, that's what it's called. It's called A Beer by Against the Grain Brewery, the same brewery that I reviewed last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And we decided this is a local brewery because we think
we did have that discussion, didn't we?
Yeah, we think Cincinnati's an hour drive, roughly. That's, hour and a half, depending on where
this one's at. Louisville. I would consider Louisville to be, relatively local. We could drive there. What was that, a couple hours?
Yeah, I would consider Cincinnati, Columbus, all those. I would consider all those somewhat local beers. So I'll give you that. We don't need to get in that again. I'll get in trouble. I have a tangent problem. I do seem to, I've never seen a fork in the road ever. All roads lead to a tangent. So, but I'm more, hey, you know me already. I'm a can art guy. What are you bringing? Show me the can. What's the can?
Of course. How could I not, get a can that just has just amazing art on it? And look at this thing.
Beer. I'll give you that. Is that what style? What is it?
It's an American Pale Ale. They have it classified as an extra American Pale Ale, which I'll need to look up the hops profile that they have for it. I would assume there's like some Amarillo or something that has, fairly high alpha acids in it.
Right.
But yeah.
And obviously you're already drinking it. I think actually you've been pounding it for about a half hour now.
No, I haven't.
Is it a good beer?
Oh yes. I would recommend it. It is, but for those that, when we had the conversation, if not last week, the week prior, about IPAs in general, about them being fairly bitter, / hoppy, this would not be, the beer for you if you're not really into that type of, that type of taste.
Right. Okay. All right. Joey, the owner of HBYOB and our other co-host tonight. How are you doing? And what are you drinking this evening?
I'm doing very well, and tonight I'm drinking a Waikiki Brewing Company Skinny Jeans. Chris, you might like the can art on that one.
I dig it. Was that one of the ones you get? I remember seeing that.
He's jealous. He's jealous of a guy in skinny jeans.
So
I can't pull that look off.
In your closet. You got skinny jeans in your closet, Chris.
I can't pull that off, man.
So this one, I actually forget about the can art. I like this one because of the bio it gives on the beer. It says, the Skinny Jeans West Coast IPA is a highly attenuated, hop-forward West Coast style IPA that was hop bursting way before the trendy NE IPAs. You'll probably have known about the hops HBC 369, blah, 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 blah. Once they become mainstream, they were called Mosaic and Simcoe and were much loved for their respective tropical and dank resinous aromatics. This beer wears skinny jeans and jackets in the summer, before it's cool.
That's a kick-ass bio right there.
Nothing would go better with it than an NE IPA that I brewed just recently that I've been really digging on. So I've got the two going on today.
All right. And I have ours in my refrigerator, and I almost brought it tonight. And then I thought, well, Joey just did one of the Hawaiian beers. I couldn't remember which one you did. So I'll drink that tomorrow. So, and you just now, you haven't had this before? That's your first cracking, or is this a beer you've had before? Joey.
So I've had this one before. It's the last one that I have left, but I remember liking it for one reason. We'll get to that in a minute, but I honestly don't remember the way it tastes. It's been so long now.
All right. I'm going to have from New Belgium, Citradelic.
Citradelic?
Is that how you pronounce it? Citradelic.
I think so.
Exotic?
Keep rotating. I think I've had that one before. Yeah, Citradelic. Yeah.
Exotic lime ale, a crisp, refreshing golden ale bursting with juicy lime, freshly ground coriander, and a hint of cracked black pepper. So, I've never had it. Now, and this is part of their fruit series. I also have their Tartastic, which is a lime ale, but has raspberry in it. Brewed with raspberry lime puree, playful, sweet, tart sip that'll put a smile on your face every time. So I brought 2 fruity drinks to the table tonight. I've enjoyed the new Belgian beers that I've tested.
They're not bad.
Ooh, man.
You can smell it?
Yeah. Lime. Yeah, strong. And I'm not a lime guy. I don't like the Bud Lime. I don't like but I am a Corona lime guy. Something about I can't drink a Corona without one, even though I'm not sure it helps much. But
I had a bad experience with Bud Light Lime.
I've been there. I think with you.
A Bud Light Lime kick your butt.
Yeah.
You drank about 30 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't the beer per se. It was how many per se that you partook. It was partook, not per se.
I blame Joey's wife for that one.
Mary?
And we paid way too much for that as well.
Yes, we did.
Wait a minute. You got
at the drive-thru.
You got pounded on
we did.
Beer?
Yeah.
How does Bud Lime get expensive?
When you send your wife to go get it, and the person working at the drive-thru knows that she doesn't have a clue what she's getting or what she's paying for it, so they tack on an extra $5 that are 10 that hits the wallet.
Yep.
I didn't know that. So that's a thing? Getting ripped off at the drive-thru?
We had a drive-thru where I used to live that was pretty notorious for marking stuff up on the spot. So
if you were just experimenting or said, I've never had that, I want to try that, and you're saying in their mind they were adding their tip.
Yes, they were. There was a gratuity added, unbeknownst, I believe, the owner and the patron.
That's kind of interesting.
I won't name drop names, but it was right up the street from where I used to live. But when you were in a pinch, you went there because it was close.
Yep.
And the beer was cold.
Okay. I'm in so far. Now, again, it's the first sip. Chris, had you had this before, or are you just going by the label?
Yeah, I've had that one before, and I do like it. I thought that one was pretty good.
See,
definitely.
The few times I've had Bud Lime, I don't know. If the word lime wasn't on the bottle, I'm not sure Bud Lime, I would tell you there's even lime in it.
For that, it's just like a hint of it.
If you drink 30 of them, you start tasting the lime.
But that's right. The alcohol's in there regardless.
Yeah.
Now, after a couple of drinks, this has a little bit of an aftertaste. Now, I don't know what that is or what I'm getting there. The lime hits you right away, and then, but I mean, it's not a bad beer.
So my beer, now that I'm drinking it, to me, it seems a lot more hop forward than I remember it. Almost a little cloyingly hoppy, like in the bitterness, not like in a good way, but I do remember now why I was talking about this, and it's because this beer, I said, man, I really like this beer, and I was like, it tastes like familiar to me, and after reading the bio again, it's because it uses Simcoe, I sound like a broken record, Simcoe is my favorite hop that I like to use, and Mosaic is becoming probably my second place favorite hop, if not first place, and this beer is only hopped with Mosaic and Simcoe, so should be up my alley. Right. So it was. I remember saying that when I drank it, like, man, this beer is really good, and I was so proud. It's like, no wonder I like it. It's got Simcoe in it. So I swear I can detect Simcoe in any beer, even if they're just...
And Simcoe is a hop.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And Mosaic is actually a descendant of Simcoe, so they crossbreeded Simcoe and another one, I believe. I don't know exactly. I know Simcoe, and it's like the father of.
Now, what's the other one? Again, not being the beer guy here. What's the one hop you guys always talk about all the time, or the most common is what?
Citra.
Nowadays,
now, since this says Citradelic, is that because they're using Citra as
most
probably
likely,
the hop?
Most likely, it could also be because there's citrus flavored hops, and
Well,
there's a lot. You got lemon drop and
but that's the point, I guess. Me being an amateur, when I looked at that, I thought of Citra as in citrus, or something as a lime or, lemon type citrus. But yes, you're saying it could be a play on words where they're using it for both.
Right.
The hop and the citrus from the citrus. So.
Yes.
That hop is appropriately named.
Okay, so it has a citrusy taste or flavor to it. I mean, what makes that what makes it the most common? Is it the flavor profile or is it the cost? What makes that a popular hop then?
I would say
go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay. I would say mostly because of the styles that folks are starting to brew nowadays. I mean, that really fits into, people want that citrus flavor to it already. So while they do already have hops that will get you that profile, like they have a Galena, Cascade, like to a certain degree, but I mean Citra now like pretty much enforces that citrus flavor to it, that aroma also as well.
All right. So, Joey, back to you as the beer shop guy. Has that been a popular hop for a while since you've been into this, or is it just something that's popularized recently?
I would say more recently, Citra has become very popular. Most beers, I would say traditionally, like the beer I'm drinking is a West Coast inspired beer. Now that hoppy beers are becoming a lot more mainstream, it used to be we kind of went for more piney, earthy notes from the hops. Nowadays, we're getting into the much more citrusy, tropical fruits. Seems like all these beers now, especially with the popularity of New England IPAs, are really trying to showcase the more fruity side of the hops. So like a lot of the traditional hops like Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, those were some of the really big hitters. Nowadays, they're still popular, don't get me wrong, but you're starting to see, like the beer that I brewed, it was all Citra and Mosaic. Citra gets that kind of lemony citrus flavor. The Mosaic gives you that tropical fruit. And
what did
a lot
you
of beers,
give me the other day?
I gave you the stout that is finally gone.
Right, which
Hallelujah.
I like. That stout, I enjoyed, and I enjoyed that stout. It had and I think you said it had fructose in it, or some kind of a sugar. I don't know. I found it a little sweet. I really enjoyed that. I liked it.
Yeah. So
now,
that beer,
I only killed 32 ounces. I didn't, kill them the whole 5 gallons, but
yeah,
that was good. Well, but then you gave me some kind of an ale or something pale that I had.
No, that was actually a true lager that I had done.
Okay.
That was a true lager, and I believe Galena was the only hop I used in it, but it was very, very mildly. I was more showcasing just a good, clean fermentation on that beer.
It was very good. I thought it was very good beer. Yeah. That growler was empty before I left the town of Bellbrook. I left where you gave it to me. I walked in and went, oh, the fried chicken was ready, and
that beer was actually brewed. I brewed that beer for people who don't like beer. So that's my kind of over. If you're not or I shouldn't say don't like beer. If you don't like craft beer, well, again, you should. And the one thing I did add to that one is there's actually flaked corn in it, which I would actually take out this time because I can actually taste the flaked corn quite a bit in the beer. And it's a flavor I'm not fond of. So I'm probably going to brew it again and just omit that.
I'm going to give you another little, tidbit. Again, I sat down to the table. First of all, I thought it was the stout. And trust me, when I'm going to eat dinner, a home brew is usually not something I'm going to have. But, the fried, I had a normal, I'm going to say a very good country meal at my wife's parents. It was fried chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, green beans. It was just one of those big, heavy meal. And usually that's a meal where, I'm sorry, just my Heineken is just going to finish that off. Meaning the Heineken is not going to take over at all. It's just going to be, a liquid. But I really went into this thinking, well, that stout wasn't that overpowering. And I have it sitting here. Unfortunately, my wife's, Mrs. Easy's, father is a Rolling Rock drinker. So the option was Rolling Rock, or I would have had, I had that. I thought it was the stout. So I opened it. I thought, well, that stout wasn't so overpowering. I could make that work with a chicken dinner. And then I poured it. I thought, man, no, that's obviously not a stout. That came out awful clear. It was perfect. A perfect beer to go with a fried chicken dinner. I'll give you that. But here's what I'm going to say, though, on your side, is when I'm pouring it, my nephew looks at me and he goes, obviously when you're pouring out of a growler, and people, and you're at a stranger's house, not a stranger's house. I'm at family's house where I've never had a homebrew there before. He looked at me and go, what is that? Or where'd that come from? He's not a beer drinker at all. I mean, at all. So he's a liquor guy. So I poured it and I said, it's just a homebrew somebody made. And me, I haven't even homebrewed a lot, especially the last few years. And even when I did, the number one thing, at least at my age, when you tell someone it's a homebrew, it's like, was the bathtub clean when they made it? There's always that bathtub. It's always a bathtub. No one ever made liquor anywhere else than a bathtub. And that's exactly, what the nephew said. He goes, he made some comment about being made in a bathtub. I said, no, it's a buddy of mine. He owns a beer store, where you can buy beer supplies, over, by the highway. And he goes, is it that HBYOB place? And I went, yeah, and I forgot he works in Miamisburg. So he drives past every day. Which to me, what I'm telling you though, is, he gave you a compliment kind of in a way, like, he knew you were a homebrew store. He knew the name, but is not a home brewer, probably would never stop in, nothing, that interesting, but obviously driving past your store. He even went that place right by Toys R Us. And I said, yeah, that's it. He goes, I see it every day. So your signage or the name, something worked, because this is somebody who doesn't know anything about it, but he knew without being prodded or anything. He just immediately went, is that HBYOB place? So,
cool. That's awesome.
Good job. So
I think I got to convince him to come in.
I think I know who we're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I said he needed to stop in.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Because he actually worked at where I work. He worked there long before you even did. I mean, he worked there for one summer. He was an employee of CNA back in the day. So I don't think you would know Brett if he walked in without saying something. Huh?
I wouldn't recognize him, no, but I thought that's
because now he's 40 years old. I mean, that's what's, it's crazy.
Time flies by.
A kid I put through high school is now 40 years old and a liquor drinker. He's just a liquor guy. And cider. So that's going to leap us right into what we're going to talk. And we do need to, though, I'd actually now have more questions on hops, but we'll go there. Maybe we need a whole episode because I really don't know. I mean, truly, we'll get into the flour. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about it other than, a little bit of that. But tonight we're going to wine a little bit. We're going to talk about homemade wine. We're going to talk about some cider. And I think if we have a little time, we talked about a little mead last week. We'll kind of maybe throw some of that in if someone has a question. Let's just start right off the bat. The difference, I don't know, let's start with the general differences between a wine, a cider, and even a beer, just to give people an idea that, what makes one a beer, what makes one a cider, what makes one a wine. Joey, I'll let you start.
So basically the biggest difference between each is what is the fermentable. When I say fermentable, I mean, what is the sugar that's the yeast is consuming to turn it to alcohol. So cider, for example, if cider didn't have alcohol in it, it's simply apple juice. So the fermentable is coming from apples. The sugar is coming from the apples. With wine, you're typically getting it from grapes. With beer, you're getting it from malt, typically like a 2-row barley, 6-row barley. And then mead, you're getting it from honey. So it's really basically each category just breaks down into where is the alcohol being generated from, what sugar. Because without sugar, there's no alcohol. And without sugar, and we also need yeast as well to consume the sugars.
Okay. Now, so technically, I realize wine is grapes, apple cider. They're both a fruit. Are there any other fruits used in making? Can you use, and I'll just throw out a raspberry. Can you make a wine out of raspberry?
Yeah.
Can you make a wine out of a blackberry? I mean, is grape an ingredient that must be in it to be considered a wine?
So that's actually where I think I had that in the notes for a show. Is mead wine? Typically, yes. Is I think you said raspberries. That's considered a fruit wine. So yes. So now the big question is, why do we call it wine? Why do we call it beer? Why do we call it cider? Beer's typically from, like I said, malted barley, and it is carbonated typically. Wine is typically higher alcohol by volume, and it's not carbonated like beer. Cider can actually be carbonated or not be carbonated, and cider actually has a kind of, in my opinion, more broadest spectrum of qualities it can have to still be a cider. And so I would say typically cider you can carbonate, you can not carbonate it. The alcohol can be very low, it can be very high, versus wine, it's typically on the higher side. When wine is carbonated, a lot of people refer to it as champagne, even though champagne is technically a place, not a thing. So it would be a sparkling wine.
Now, and maybe Chris, I'll ask you if you know the answer, because in my mind, for it to be cider, it must have apples. But to be wine, it doesn't necessarily have to have grapes. Is that true?
I mean, I would consider that to be true. I mean, just in the sense that, again, as Joey was mentioning, it's where your fermentables are coming from. So if you can if you could take, I don't even know how many pounds of, blackberries or raspberries that you would need in order to create a, typical batch of wine. The same
amount of sugar you would get out of the
same amount of sugar. Yeah, right. If you were able to get that volume and same amount of juice, which would give you the same amount of sugar, then yeah, you could make a wine out of that. And I think that's possible. So it really just comes down to what flavor are you looking for? But I don't think that grapes would have to be are a requirement for it.
But can I guess then, to make this a little more complex, can you have a wine that's made out of only apple but not be considered cider?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Typically an apple wine, which is what the recipes are for, are 12-14% alcohol by volume, and they're not carbonated. Versus a cider is usually going to be below 12%, and it can or can't be carbonated.
And I guess in my mind, ciders always seem to be sweeter. Mm-hmm. Is it just because they're more popular being sweeter? I mean, I realize there's sweet wines, but most wines, in my opinion, are not sweet. I'm not a wine drinker. And when I do, it has to be a pretty sweet type of wine. Yeah. But ciders to me always seem to be sweet.
The commercial ciders, yes, but a lot of homebrew ciders are a lot of times on the dry side. That actually is a good example of this year, for the first time ever. I promise I'm going to do it before it's too late, and right now's the time. I'm making dandelion wine, which is truly the yellow dandelions that, well, a lot of people don't have in the front yard, but I've got them in my front yard. You truly cut just the yellow part off the tops of them, and you add just table sugar if you want to get the alcohol by volume. So I'm going to make dandelion wine this year. So I think wine to me is more of a term. We commonly suggest it towards grapes because that's the most bought. But it's typically 12-14% alcohol, even 8% or above. And it's usually not carbonated. Like I said, they call it sparkling wine.
Right. And obviously, and that's why I brought what I brought today, beer wise. Both of these beers have fruits in them, but they're obviously not wines, and they're obviously not ciders. One's lime and one's raspberry.
Those beers are being flavored from the fruits more so than the fermentability is coming from it.
I got you. Where the fermentation part is what kind of dictates more, if it's a wine or whatever. That's where the sugars are actually coming from.
Which, it's kind of funny because, a lot of the customers that come into the store are beer makers, wine makers, or I call them, more of the DIY kind of wine makers. And like right now, I've got like 7 samples. I promise I'm going to get caught up on drinking, but I've still yet to get like a fruit wine or a dandelion wine or just some, cool concoction, kind of like what Mark said before. A lot of times when people go, "Oh, my grandpa used to make wine and it was terrible. It tastes like it came out of his bathtub." A lot of people do confuse. I think home brewing in general can sometimes get a negative impact just because there was a lot of really bad winemakers out there that was making it. And so home brewing in general is like, I remember when my grandpa did that and it was terrible. So I'm not going to Yeah.
I'm older, and my grandfather would, he's passed away. He would be 100 now. I mean, I know for a fact my grandfather, and now you say that, made a little bit. Yep. My grandfather made alcohol. The flavoring, what fermented it or whatever.
The secondary.
Yeah.
Grandpa was making medicine. Meaning the flavor was not the target.
Secondary, yeah.
Right. The little red bullseye on the dartboard was not a fruit flavor. That was an alcohol. So anything other than that, that was if I make enough of this, I can handle grandma another month. So
which a lot of the wines that in the store, it's kind of funny. I get a fair amount of winemakers, and they usually jump to two sides. One are like my side of the and it's really sweet wines like Moscato. I'm getting ready to make an ice wine. Hopefully I can talk Chris into help me film a video on how to make wine doing it. An ice wine, very sweet wines. And a lot of people, now that they've discovered sweet wines, are really learning that they typically, or a lot of times they do enjoy wine. Or I get the complete and other side of winemakers who it's very, very, very dry wines like, the Cabs and even Merlots, some of the really, really dry wines. And those are the ones where I think most people go, oh, I don't like wine. Wine to me is kind of like, I use the term like comparing cigars. A lot of really big cigar aficionados like the really dark cigars and so forth and so on versus the newbies, like where I'm going to compare it to the winemakers, like the really sweet stuff. But I still like what I like, and I'm trying to get that palate and that appreciation for dry wines, but I'm still not.
All right, because you obviously, we've had that conversation before. I mean, you didn't have the palate for some of the beer we drink now.
No, absolutely not.
I'd say all three of us kind of started there. Yep. I mean, all of us would have said, hey, I just can't tolerate that stuff. And trust me, that the stout, when you gave me a week ago, I brought that home and I poured it. One of my sons looked at it and went, oh, same thing. I just can't drink anything that dark. Yeah. Then he took a drink. He goes, that isn't bad. They look at the darkness and immediately think, I'm not going to like that. It's going to be overpowering flavor versus, and it's really, a lot of stouts aren't actually. So
a lot of people can also confuse dark beers with being very high in alcohol.
Right. And they're not always. And actually it's usually the opposite.
Yeah.
It can be, from time to time, for sure.
No, don't get me wrong. The KBS that I drank last show was.
Oh, wasn't that like double digits? Yeah. Yeah.
My next question is not just comparing wine, cider, and beer, but my question will be: at home, I buy a thing of cider. I go to a festival. I get a thing of cider. I drink half of it.
Mm-hmm.
The bottle gets shoved to the back of the refrigerator. Mm-hmm. I open it 2 months later. What the hell's in that bottle at this point? Is that wine, cider, or just something I need to dump out?
Depending on what it is, it could be vinegar.
Okay, yeah, which is the next question. Where do you cross the line in it being a cider, or wine, or vinegar? What makes that turn?
So wild yeast getting to it is what makes it turn. If it's high enough alcohol, you don't have to worry about it as much. If it's in the like 4 to 6-7% range is when you could possibly risk it turning into vinegar, because the wild yeast just get to it and it ferments. That's why pasteurization and sorbates and things a lot of times are added to commercially bought apple ciders and things like that to keep it from happening.
Right. Because I think we talked a while back about prison wine, but same thing. You take, I've opened a jug of orange juice that got shoved to the back of a refrigerator, and I'm sure you've all done that before. You grab it, there's a problem before, when you reach for that plastic container and you feel you're like, that bastard's, you can't even squeeze it. It's been in there a little while, and then you open it. There's pressure in there. I mean,
it's fermenting.
Yeah. I mean, it truly is just some sugar and some fruit in there that obviously has now, done something.
It's even like milk when that day hits, or that milk date stamped on there, and you're shaking to pour it in your glass. I mean, but the day is, if it pours out chunky, isn't that just cottage cheese?
At that point, yeah.
But yet we buy that separately.
Cheese, buttermilk. There's all different. unfortunately, we come from an age where waste is tolerated a little more,
Mhm.
where, back to my grandpa who made alcohol,
Yeah.
they would never throw milk away. Meaning
Yeah.
it got to a certain point, it might not be cereal worthy anymore,
Sure.
but now it was good enough to make
Cheese, yeah.
pancakes out of,
Yeah.
now, which buttermilk pancakes became popular because, hey, that has a little more flavor than the other guy's pancake. What'd you do? I used milk that is spoiled.
Yeah.
We use the word spoiled. They
Yeah.
would say not spoiled. It's just turned. My grandma would always say that milk's turned, don't drink that one, drink the other one, because grandma used that for other stuff.
Well, nowadays it's even funnier because like the other day, my wife brought me Chipotle to work and she's like, sorry, there's no lettuce on it. And I'm like, why not? She said, because they recalled lettuce.
Oh yeah.
She's like, oh, there's like E. coli or something in the lettuce. I'm like, wait, you mean to tell me there's a health risk on eating lettuce?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
because they spray it and they do stuff to it.
I don't know. I just thought that was hilarious that to have a health hazard on lettuce seems to me. If I kick the bucket because of eating lettuce, I think I should just have LOL on my tombstone.
Well, last year it happened to spinach. Believe it or not, spinach went the same way. There was spinach wine. Can you make spinach wine? Can I?
I'm sure you could.
I guess because
most entered into that beer category at the next.
Probably I'll do it.
I guess technically, don't most plants have some amounts of sugar in them? Obviously, and that's all you need, right?
Yeah.
You just need some kind of sugar.
Shit ton of spinach in order to get you some enough fermentable sugars.
I'm not
drinking that.
I see. We'll need a bigger bucket. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
if we're gonna use a old bucket, much bigger.
Yeah, the amount of spinach you'll need. You're going to be rivaling like Popeye's intake or something like that.
Right. and now here's another. And again, it's one of those videos as a kid I saw, and to this day I just remember it and even then as a kid I didn't get it. We had the again, I grew up when we only had 3 channels, so you end up watching these nature shows. But there was a monkey, a group of monkeys there was a tree, and it was a form of an apple, but these monkeys would not eat that until it was, like grandma would say, the apples have turned. But this video showed these monkeys, when a certain time that fruit would get to a certain point, these monkeys would go and murder that tree. But what was funny is then they would sit there, you'd watch them, all of a sudden you would see monkeys falling because they were drunk off, meaning, and that was just, so the fruit actually fermented inside of itself. You know what I'm saying? That's what they were talking about. And as a kid, I didn't get that, but later on in my head, I've played that video over 1 million times because I've, drunk enough where I've fallen off a limb. But it's just hysterical to watch these 10, this couple families of monkeys bang this big tree out, and they did it 100% to get drunk. These monkeys knew what they were doing. This was a great day for them.
That's next level.
But obviously nature, alcohol is a nature made thing, right? We've perfected it as humans, but it is something that just happens in nature, right?
Yeah. Wild yeast. Folks, you can read stories about, the monks in some of the old abbeys and how they would get, some of their meads and wines to ferment. They would just let some of the stuff just sit out. Wild yeast gets to it, and then it winds up fermenting. And that's how you wind up with some of the alcohol from back in the day.
So which is closer? I think we've talked in the past that a beer recipe is one of the oldest recipes ever found. But, what is the closest thing that you would find in nature by itself? A wine, a cider, or a beer? What, if you were to come across a naturally fermented, beverage or drink or liquid, would it be more of a wine, a cider, or a beer that you would find in nature on its own?
So the oldest naturally fermented beverage known to man is mead. And I believe that's because the bees eat the sugar, the bees, you get the honey from the sugar. And because the bees are in a field where all these plants are wild. There's yeast and everything.
So you have
all in
yeast.
it. Yeah. So mead is the oldest known fermented beverage, and it was done by accident, just like almost everything. But beer was the same way. They had a bunch of grains, they laid it out, rainwater got through it, wildly fermented. The original recipes for beer, I forget. I need to look this up, but it was water, barley, and hops. That was the original beer recipe. They truly did not know for centuries that yeast, because it wildly fermented, it soured. So they really did not know for years that they thought they were magic brewing spoons. A lot of cultures thought the gods were turning it to alcohol. They really didn't know what was doing it. They just left it open, and Mother Nature took care of the rest.
What? So. Only because you said it, and we're talking time and all that. Beers being one of the oldest recipes, but or mead even. Where do these terms come from? Do we know, Chris, Joe, either one? I mean, the word beer. Obviously, I know it. Just again, Grandpa drank beer that was turned also, but it's always been called beer to me. Is that what I mean? What's the real name of this beverage? I mean, is when they made it 10,000 years ago or whatever, it was the oldest recipe. What was it called then? I'm sure not beer.
I honestly
don't know.
That. Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell you.
Worthy.
Yeah. That's homework for next week.
Okay, but which is that? I guess that's where I was going. I mean, you said mead was the oldest, obviously. I mean, and then wine. I'm just kind of curious where these names come from. And
wine to me makes sense because back to like you said, Mark, our great grandparents did not let anything go to waste. So you've got all these fields and orchards of, I don't care if it's fruit, I don't care if it's, well, honey doesn't ever go bad, so we won't count honey, but of grapes, what's a better way? Sauerkraut, we ferment things. We fermented a lot of things to keep the crops from ever going bad.
Allows it, right. Fermentation keeps the life cycle of the food longer.
Exactly. So we turned it to alcohol. I think that's the reason why, we even have such a good heritage of spirits, because, if you take corn, for example, and you get the fermentability out of the corn and then you distill it, you're now completely concentrating into a solution that's never going to go bad.
Right.
We utilized everything out of the crops, and, obviously alcohol has a, what's the term I'm looking for? Not hallucinogen, but, you get inebriated from alcohol. So obviously back in the good old days, I mean, that was very appealing to our ancestors and even today.
And I would also think that just the accessibility of the ingredients, I mean, that we're talking about here. I mean, a lot of folks had not necessarily vineyards in the sense that what we see today, but a lot of people had the farms that that would carry just rows of grapes and strawberries and all of those things where you could probably put that stuff together fairly easily. And if, like you were just saying, if you were going to, if you had a bunch of crops and you had a bunch of stuff left over, it would probably be fairly easier for you to say that, okay, well, we're going to sell off or, take most of the stuff to market. And whenever we don't sell, we'll just toss it into a barrel, we'll mash it up, toss it into a barrel with some water, and then we'll have some alcohol in 6 to 9 months, something like that.
Well, it's just like the, strawberries and grapes, we made jams. Yep. We make butter and, so forth and so on. I mean, most of the butter at our house, we don't even put in the refrigerator. We just let it sit out on the counter. So, I mean, for fermentation and salts, and there was a lot of things we did just to we didn't let nothing go to waste. That's the reason why, even beef jerky, it was all preservation. That was the big reason we did it.
Salt and dried meat.
It says the Latin word is B-I-B-E-R-E.
I did know that.
Bibri, which means to drink. That word means to drink.
Yeah. Beer means to drink.
Well, the word B-I-B-E-R-E. Bibri. I don't know how
you really
pronounce it.
I think, did you just spell Bieber? That's what it sounds like you just spelled.
Yeah, Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber to drink.
Hell?
Hey, he fits the name. I'm just saying, right? Bieber means
fever.
In Latin, just means to drink. So, meaning someone said, "Hey, it doesn't taste good, but drink this shit because you're gonna enjoy it if you partake." So, All right, and they do say now they even on the one history here I just looked up real quick they say that beer was one of the original oldest recipes.
Well,
I have heard mead is. I've even had a few people say no, bread is. Water and flour.
Yeah,
because it was the wheat that they were collecting to make flour or whatever for bread that made them figure out they could do this fermentable. But
that was the other thing. For centuries, they thought that by turning it to alcohol, it could make water drinkable because people were getting sick from drinking the local water source.
Right.
What they did not know, to my best knowledge, this could be urban myth, but to my best knowledge, what they did not know was actually boiling the beer was actually making it drinkable. It had nothing to do with turning it to alcohol. They knew by turning
boiling
it to beer,
the water, technically.
Correct.
You said boil the beer. I get it. They're boiling the wort, which is the water, and they're just turning it into a drinkable.
So they would get the water from the stream down, and they would make alcohol out of it. And they thought by turning it to alcohol, it made it drinkable. And a lot of beers, of very later days were like 2% alcohol. I mean, they were minuscule. They thought that it was making the water drinkable from their local water source. They didn't know it was actually boiling it, was sterilizing it. So
right. But it also was a way, obviously, to use those grains that you could not store. You obviously could store beer or a liquid easier than you could 50 pounds of flour or something like that, where you had rodents get in it or things like that. I've always heard that was
food.
Yeah. And it was liquid food, right? In the middle of winter, you had no other way to do something or whatever. This, hey, it's gotten me through many a nights, so.
Man, imagine nowadays, like you get the sniffles and your doctor telling you to go get hammered.
I don't have a problem with that. And actually, that's still.
You bite on this towel, we're going to chop your leg off.
Yeah. I am not a liquor drinker, but I'll be the first to tell you. I mean, when I start feeling a little, you know how it is. You get that, that day before the cold, you get that little feeling. I will have a couple shots. It seems to help a sore throat. And
at least go to sleep.
I've never tried that. I've never tried that before.
And I think that's part of it. I think it's a whole combination. Now, and that's the other thing. Most all this weird stuff we talk about was either, it, like you said, it was either a way to store the food longer or it was a medicine. A lot of whiskeys and things like that, eventually they made them so strong. That was, the whole point. Well, this will cure you. It was so strong liquor. It didn't.
Oh, yeah.
It just made you forget you weren't feeling well. Everybody's seen the movie where they, give the cowboy a shot of some kind of whiskey before they dig that bullet out of his leg.
Yeah.
And then once he drinks it, they pull the bullet out. Then they take the bottle and pour it over the wound to sterilize. So the whole you used it for internal medicine and external.
I don't know. I think the best drinker in a Western movie has got to be Val Kilmer in the one where he plays Doc Hollywood. I don't know the name of the movie, but
Doc Holliday,
him slinging
Tombstone.
Because he's dying old in the whole movie. He's coughing up blood and the whole works, and him just being completely drunk between all the scenes with nothing to lose, to me is hilarious.
Well, let's get into making of these. What do I need to buy? I mean, can I buy a beer kit and use that to make wine and mead?
The equipment that you need, yeah. Most of it. If not, everything that you'd get in a beer making kit, I would assume that you could transfer over to a wine making kit. Am I wrong?
I know, Joe, you carry both. You can buy a beer kit or a wine kit. If I came in and said I'm looking for a general kit that I could do both, is that possible? And if so, which one of those two kits would allow me to do both?
The answer is sort of.
Okay, thank you.
So, with beer, the biggest difference between wine and beer. So we'll just say wine and beer is a general term. Wine's typically non-carbonated. Beer's typically carbonated. So beer, you're going to need a capper. Wine, you're going to need a corker. That's really the biggest difference between the two. It's going to be your bottles, your corks, or with beer, your bottles and caps. So the corking device is a big one. I would say with cider, like I said, you can technically do it either or.
I guess I'm starting more the initial part of brewing, meaning I still need a pot, I, even for wine, and I still need some kind of a bucket and a fermenting device, right?
Well, that's the beauty of winemaking is you don't need
a pot.
You don't need a pot. You're truly just kind of pouring it in there and adding the yeast. You're not brewing, quote unquote, brewing anything, or boiling would be a better term.
Okay.
So that's a big benefit. And what's strange, and I don't know why, I think it has to do with the metric system, but beer's typically 5 gallons, wine and cider's typically 6 gallons. So I tell people, if pick the kit that you're going to lean more towards, but if you're going to be doing both, you're going to want to keep your fermenters with wine and beer separate anyway.
Okay.
But you're going to need a bigger one for wine because they're typically 6 gallons. Like I said, I think it has to do with the metric system. Don't quote me on that, but typically beer's 5.
And I'd assume that depending on how you're getting your juice, I mean, you might need a larger container to either store the fruit that you're using in order to mash it down. A buddy of mine, I think he actually stopped into the store one day because he makes wine. I think they use like trash cans in order to store all of their grapes and whatnot. Mash it all down and then toss it into the bucket afterwards.
Now, I mean, in wine and smashing it with bare feet, is that a true thing that's happened in the past? Was that a common way to make wine, or is that just something that amateurs like us hear about? And in movies you always see the person in their bare feet making wine. Is that,
I don't know, but that sounds disgusting.
Joey,
I can't answer the question, but what I can tell you, top 5 funniest YouTube videos of all time. Do you know it, Mark? Do you know it, Chris?
Yes,
is that girl on the newscast?
Yes.
She falls off that top.
Yes, I remember that.
Hysterical.
Noise generates out, even though she's in immense pain.
We are live on YouTube, but as soon as we're done, which we go about an hour and 7 minutes,
that.
You do got to go watch the woman falling off the wine smashing. But
yeah.
So what you're saying is, I don't have to take my socks off to make wine from the kit I buy at HBYOB.
The kits that we get, the kits you get from the store, the beauty is they've already pressed, which is what you're referring to by stomping on them. They've already pressed the grape concentrate out of the grapes for you. Some of
I got you. So you're buying already pureed grape, more
pureed. It's juice. Some of
so there's no pulp or anything.
Some of the kits actually will have grape skins to be true to the style of wine you're making that you will add to your fermenter to get the tannins from the skins for your wine to have it more authentic to the recipe.
Look at the brain on Brad.
Look at the big brains on Brad. and now, stop me if I'm wrong, Joey, but then you can determine the sweetness. Like if you want a sweeter wine, that's determined by the fermentation period, right? Like if I wanted a sweeter wine, I would want it to ferment, a less amount of time than a drier wine, correct? Because I want more sugars left behind to make it sweet.
It's actually not the case. So what happens say Moscato. Yeah. Okay, so if Chris, you're a beer maker. If you want to make a dry wine, you do what you do with beer making. You add your yeast, you let it ferment all the way out.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk. I think we talked about earlier, like if you want to add lactose to your beer to give it residual sweetness. The beauty of wine is we don't need active yeast in the wine to carbonate our beer. Forget about kegging. But so with wine, what we do is like the Moscato I made for Mary. I add the yeast, it ferments all the way out. With the wine, the Moscato wine kit, you get 2 bladders of juice. A really big bladder where your fermentables come from, and then a back sweetening bladder. So after primary fermentation is done, we add potassium sorbate and potassium metabisulfate to kill all active yeast living in the wine. Now we've killed all active yeast living in the wine. We can now add back sweetening juice to the wine to give it that nice, good, sweet flavor
Could you just cold crash instead? Or
pending you never let the wine get warm ever again.
Oh, that's true, because it'll just
you don't want bottle bombs, or pushing the corks out. So we add the potassium sorbate, the potassium metabisulfate, and that kills off all active yeasts. We then add the back sweetening juice, and then now there's no living yeast. So in beer, that would be a bummer because we can't naturally carbonate it. Yeah. That's why a lot of times we'll use non-fermentable sugars like lactose and so forth and so on. But with wine, we even have wine conditioner in the store that has the sorbates in it to keep your... My point is you could not naturally carbonate wine after you've added those additives, but you could have, to answer your question, you ferment all the way out, no different. You just, you do what's referred to as back sweetening.
Okay.
Versus cider, like we had spoke when Mark said earlier on the cider, is
Right,
it
like
typically
Angry
dry? Is it
Orchard is
typically
very
sly?
sweet.
Yes.
So like if you back sweet, so yes, Angry Orchard's probably using potassium metabisulfate or something to kill the yeast. They're probably pasteurizing it in all honesty, but then they're adding juice after the fact. But since they're not naturally carbonating it, they're using CO2 injection to do it. They can then package it into the bottles. So if you're as a home brewer speaking, if you're kegging, you can do it like Angry Orchard does it or whoever.
Right.
If you're naturally bottle conditioning, it makes it much more difficult if you want it carbonated.
Right. Okay.
All right. So, the question I'm going to have now, back to the brew shop. Let's say this month you have 10. Obviously, I don't want to use the word brewers. You have 10 customers that get into wine or beer. What percentage are those 10 are going to be wine first, beer first? Is it 50-50, or do most people start with beer and go to wine, or do most people start with wine and move to beer? Or is it just, they just do the one they want and that's it?
So I guess to sum it up, the other day, I had a customer of mine who's a winemaker who came in and got a bunch of kegging stuff for his beer because he buys his beer locally, makes his wine, buys his beer. I've got a lot of people who come in and buy all their beer making supplies, but still buy commercially bought wine. It usually does seem like people will usually fluctuate to one or the other. It's just personal preference. And I think it comes down to, with 6 gallons of wine, you're going to make 30 bottles. So you're committing to being more of a wine drinker than beer drinker. I have a handful of customers that do both. But like, I would be even a perfect example. I make wine maybe 2 batches a year with a 1 gallon mead. And now this year's dandelion wine, I swear I'm doing it. Because I swear I was going to do it last year and I didn't do it.
Buzz, 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 buzz.
But I just don't make wine very often. So,
but also, you're not a big wine drinker either. So obviously, you're going to make what you're drinking more of. So,
which makes me want to go buy more commercial wine so I can get a better appreciation for it. So when I make it, I have something to compare it to.
But I guess that's back to I'm taking us out of the thing, because we've all, we're here because we're beer people. But in your store, do you get the same percentage of first time customers coming in truly just interested in making wine as you do beer?
Yeah.
Or still beer more common for
beer's more? I would say beers are our core customer, but as far as newbies go, it's probably a 50-50 split.
All right.
As far as wine and beer goes, cider is actually a smaller demographic of people, but
because of what you talked about, the extract and or the you didn't call it puree, but the bag of the fruit itself. Does wine have 2 different methods? I mean, I know last week we talked extract versus all grain. Is there? I mean, does wine making have those same elements? Meaning, is there an easy way to get into making wine versus somebody would say, but this is the right way, or is it really, the same either way? Meaning, is other than smashing the grapes with your own feet, is there anything? I mean, is there an extract versus not an extract? I don't even know the comparison I'm trying to make here, but
you mean a simple way versus a complex way?
Thank you. That was a simple way to make a complex question much simpler.
But from what I understand, it seems like it seems to be the only a simple way to do it. I mean, I would take that back. The only way that you can make it more complicated is if you actually go out, pick your own grapes, and then stomp on them with your feet. And you're actually,
I'm guessing there's a way to do it other than stomping, but
right. But the harvesting portion and then getting the fermentable sugars and the juice and all that, I mean, that would be the only complex portion.
Have you had customer? I mean, in Ohio, you can grow grapes. We don't have the best grapes in the world, but you can. Have you had a customer make his own wine using his own grapes, Joey?
That's actually, hilarious that you say that, because, so first off, I answer your question.
I'm a funny guy.
Extract versus all grain, you get people who are like the kits we have in the store, and I do get asked the question a lot. I haven't done it yet in the store. Is every year when all the local farmers, you can truly just buy like a 5-gallon bucket of truly just juice concentrate. It's not a kit, doesn't have directions or all the additives, or you're just buying it, juice concentrate in bulk. But I absolutely have a huge amount of customers who are, they have their own, grape orchards, and they don't want them to go to waste. So they'll come in and buy all the equipment because they want to make their own wine. So the people who do that are typically have farmland, or they bought a property that has a bunch of grapes on it. So they're getting into home brewing because, honestly, if you really want me to dial back the hands of time, the first time I've ever had homebrew was a neighbor when I grew up, lived across the street from me, who had grapes growing in his backyard, and he made his own wine because he had all these extra grapes. So there are a lot of people who get into winemaking just because they've got a field full of apples for cider or grapes or whatever. So they don't want them to go to waste. So they come and get the fermenters and get it going. A lot of my winemakers typically, instead of all grain extract, like with beer, split into two categories. It's the ones that just make it from kit because they like drinking wine. The kits make fantastic wine. And then the second group is truly, I went to a farmer's market and I've got 30 pounds of peaches. What do I do with them? They're more of the DIY brewers, and I do get a lot of them. So,
all right. And pears too. I know you can make pear cider, because I know around in here in Ohio, we got a lot of pear farmers and apple farmers. So obviously you could go somewhere, because I always had that question, you go to a festival and I've seen a guy, I've seen him dump the apples, into a thing, squeeze it, pour it into a jug and hand it to you and say, here's cider. But I don't know. I guess when I squeeze a fruit, what comes out of it is juice. So I've always wondered, what's the difference in apple juice and apple cider? And people tell me it's the way it's pasteurized. Well, I'm sorry. If you squeeze something and liquid comes out, I call that juice. But in the apple industry, no, that's called cider. If you filter it and pasteurize it, now that's juice. Seems backwards to me, but
we speak, we work, we don't have the metric system, so we do a lot of things backwards, and our terminology and our units of measure are completely
all right,
without a doubt.
Well, we've gone a little over 55 minutes. We're going to get to our question of the week, which also will get me into next week. We're going to do a troubleshooting or frequently asked questions episode. So we want you people on YouTube or people that come into Joey's store, submit some questions for us, so we can get into them and help you guys out. Because that's the whole point anyway. I mean, we're here to help answer some questions, and hell, we're here just to have a good time. But the question of the day is really just kind of simple, and it's been one I've had in the past, and I'm not sure I ever got the right answer, other than eventually I just did what the hell was easiest, and that is just simply bottle cleaning. And we'll go, and this would fit into wine too, and that's bottle cleaning. And the question is, can I just put my bottles in a dishwasher, and will that make them clean enough and to reuse versus using a brush and cleaning them out physically? So that's the question of the day. Someone just wants to know, is a dishwasher a good enough piece of equipment to clean your bottles?
Yes. Well, I'll take Joey's answer from earlier. Yes and no.
All right.
I'd say for the, let's say 75% of the time, sure. I mean, you can, especially depending on where you place them in the dishwasher, the jet should be able to get in there and, knock most of the sediment out. But if you afterwards, if you check inside the bottle and you still see a bunch of, caked stuff inside there,
flavor crystals.
Sure, if you want to call them that, we can go with that. That's where you need, something a little bit stronger. And I know they sell the I forget what they're called, but they can hook up to your faucet, and then they allow for a little bit more pressure that can be shot up into the bottle itself that can clean out
those in the store.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend those. I bought one. I used those. I used it for a number of years. When I was bottling primarily for the first, let's say 3 or 4 years of home brewing. And I would recommend that, because when it comes to bottling, if you're using the same set of bottles, you're going to wind up with that stuff down at the bottom of your of your beer bottle.
Right.
That's just a byproduct of home brewing and bottling.
Well, then, because you said it, Joey, what is the bottle cleaning methods you carry in the store besides, and I'll be honest, the number one thing I learned back in my day was when you're done drinking the shit, go rinse the bottle out now. I learned that the best way to clean a bottle was to rinse it as soon as I was drinking it.
But hey, after 5 or 6 of them, you might not remember to do that.
So to answer your question, we like to eat nachos at our house. If you eat nachos and leave your plate out overnight and then put it in the dishwasher, guess what? That cheese that was left over on the nacho plate is going to be on there.
Right. Nacho cheese sauce is nature's super glue.
Yes. Now, if you put that in the dishwasher and start the dishwasher immediately, you're good to go. That's how I would answer the question. So to answer, so if you wash the bottle out and get it very clean, as soon as you're done pouring it into your glass, you're good to go. If it's going to sit overnight, then yes, you're going to want to use a bottle blaster, a brush. You're going to want to clean it out by hand.
All right. So the answer to this person's question is maybe. And I'm learning quickly in brewing. That's the answer to every damn thing.
It's situational. It's all
we have learned. There is and again, me and Chris do a fantasy football show or fantasy anything. Tonight was just football, but you know what? It's the same thing in fantasy. Very rarely is there a yes or no question. There's an if and but. There's a yes, coulda, woulda. There's a shoulda, maybe. And brewing does seem to be very similar. That
brewing, and that's the thing I love about brewing is unsolved. Just like I'm sure fantasy football is, just like almost everything in life, it's unsolved. So for anyone, I guess to me, the answer to everything is I don't know is actually the correct answer. I can't answer a question and tell you definitively.
I'm an expert. That's why I'm here. I'm an expert.
But at the end of the day, like that's why I like Brewlosifer and a lot of these other people. To me, I'm not saying we should push the boundaries, but at the same point in time, we don't have to question all the boundaries. But also saying that doesn't mean it has to be yes or no. There is always middle ground with pretty much any question that could be on the show.
Right. And honestly, I think some folks learn better if you explain the situations or the reason why you would do X, Y, or Z, because some folks have been in those same situations.
Well,
like, I did.
Technically, the way this person worded the question to me, I would say the answer is yes, you can. Their point is, can you? You can.
Yeah, you can.
But like Joey said, if you're putting in some nasty ass bottle, it's not going to work as well. If you've rinsed it out and taken care of it that way, and the word sanitation, I still don't think that makes it sanitized necessarily. I know it can come out real hot, and maybe if you use it right away, but I would assume if you clean them and then put them away, you obviously still got to sanitize them before you reuse them.
Absolutely.
Well, when I bottle, I always rinse my bottles immediately after I pour them into the glass. Then they go in my dishwasher. I use the rinse and sanitize cycle. They rinse all the whatever's left behind, and then it goes through such a heat cycle that I don't even use Star San for the most part because I'm typically only bottling wine with a corker, and wine is 14-ish% alcohol because the ABV. I don't worry too much about sanitization. So, it goes both ways with it.
Okay. All right. Again, I mentioned it next week. Go to HBYOB.com. Submit your questions. If you go into the store, you can, let Joey know your question. He'll write it down. We'll bring it to the table. Or join us live next Tuesday night. On YouTube. There's a chat room. Chris, let us know where people can find you. I'm going to use the word real quick. I'm pretty sure you already said your beer was pretty good. Now that you've drank the whole thing, you're going to give that a 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I'd give it a 2 thumbs up. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. How about that? No, that was pretty good.
Where can people find you if they want to shoot you a question for next week?
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX, and then we're planning some events down at HBYOB, and then the 5K that's coming up soon. Joey, be sure to tell them about that.
The HBYOB fun run.
Oh yeah.
All right, Joey. Again, where can people contact you if they have a question? And again, just quickly, the beer. I thought you originally said you had a couple comments about the beer, but I mean, let me know your final, because I have one of those in the refrigerator. Am I going to like it?
So the beer, I would rate it this way. It's the last beer I have of it, and I would not rush out to go buy it. So I would give it a 6 out of 10. It's a good beer. Don't get me wrong. I just wouldn't. And if you want to email me directly, I'm Joey at HBYOB.com, and all my social media and everything's in the description on the YouTube page.
All right. And I'm Easy Kill on Twitter at A Fantasy Fan. You can shoot me a question there. Me and Chris do, fantasy sports talk show, just A Fantasy Fan Sportscast. We've had fun. Like I said, shoot us a question or two, because like I said, we're here to help you. We appreciate y'all coming out tonight. We will see you next Tuesday. I enjoyed my Citra something beer. I'd buy another couple of those. I enjoyed it. Thank you. I like the little tad of black pepper they added. I kicked it right off. Fresh cracked black pepper. Everybody, again, appreciate you for coming out tonight. We will see you next Tuesday, approximately the same time. Guys, the weather's turning around here, so get out there and brew this weekend. Go to HBYOB.com, buy your equipment, and then, let us know. And I've heard now every once in a while, Joey gets a sample or two. So, maybe we'll test your beer here on the show. So
next cast, we're going to do user submissions, and I've got like 5 beers. I don't need to drink too much on cast, but I need to bring in some of these user submissions.
Oh, wait a minute. You got to make sure the co-hosts get a 1 or 2 on there.
I'll have to come down, man. I'll grab one.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Say goodnight.